Viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Ramadan Mubarak to you and to your beloved families. Thank you very much for joining us live on Ahlulbayt TV this evening, live on Spiritual Conversations. Now, managing how we feel while fasting can certainly help us achieve our goals in this blessed month of Ramadan. With a mind at rest and a heart at peace, inshallah, it can be a lot easier to attain and maintain the serenity and khushu' that we all seek and desire during this blessed month. So how can we take full advantage of this year's Ramadan blessings, and how can we use this blessed month to improve our mental health? I'm delighted to be joined by Sheikh Ali Mehdi all the way from Australia. I know it's 5 a.m. in the morning, Sheikhana, so I hope your mental health is very high for this program, Sheikhana. So thank you again for joining us and for taking the time to discussing this topic with us. How can we use Ramadan to improve our mental health?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to join you again on this program and discuss such an important issue as mental health. It really is the modern day crisis that we're facing, that they have finally identified and approved it to be something that is a disease and a mental psychological condition. May the month be blessed upon all of you as well. Shahr Ramadan Mubarak to you, brother, and to all the viewers out there tonight. So I thought we would begin with discussing this concept with just defining exactly what is the concept of mental health and how does it intersect with the Islamic belief, and what does Islam have to say about mental health and psychological well-being. To begin with this, the concept of mental health and the approach that has been taken regarding mental health is something that's relatively new. So it has been mentioned in medical journals as far back as the 1800s, but it's only around the mid-1900s where they actually started to speak about it in technical terms. And the problem is, this is something that happens a lot in the West and in Western ideologies, where we only look at something seriously when it affects our productivity. So when something affects productivity, all of a sudden it needs to be taken seriously. So we need to understand, the reason we need to understand the way that it's defined from a psychological perspective, from a scientific perspective, and from a Western perspective, is the fact that it is rather different than the way that we look at it from an Islamic perspective. And just to have a brief understanding of this, although I know that this is perhaps beyond the scope of what we would like to discuss tonight, according to the World Health Organization, mental health is the ability to cope with adverse conditions, the ability to cope with life. And these things started to come out particularly after World War I and World War II, when soldiers were suffering things like shell shock, or they found in World War I a lot of the soldiers would not discharge their rifles against the enemy. And the problem with this is, although they tried to dehumanize the enemy was Western and white and looked like the combatants. So the Allies and the Axis looked the same. English versus French, American versus German. So when you look at the two parties, they look the same, and so they found that they found it difficult to discharge their rifle upon a human being that looks like them. So they really had to work to destroy this concept of empathy, and they had to think about how can we make these people have resilience against this. And really, when you look at the definitions, this is the way that they look at mental health, that it's the ability to cope. And they break it down to protective factors and risk factors. And the more protective factors you have, the more resilient that you may be. So this is the Western perspective. Now, as you can see, the problem is it's very challenging to what is symptomatic, but we never look or rarely look at the root cause. And you have a look at a lot of the problems that we actually have. Never do they look at the root cause, they look at the problems. Recently, for example, in the United Kingdom, or in France, the industrial action that was taken by some of the unions, the rail union being a major player in the United Kingdom, to work on getting this pay rise. Now, the issue there, as you can see, they looked at the symptoms, and a lot of the media was concentrating on, oh, well, you're stopping the transit system, you're stopping the economy of Britain by doing this, for example. And the French, they're doing the same thing, but the people are still fighting for what it is. So rather than look at the root cause, they come down to the symptoms. And mental health has not been safe from this surface level approach when it comes to it. So ultimately, the way that mental health is looked at in the West is they have a look at it and say, all right, take some time off for yourself. Build on your protective factors, such as having friends, groups of people you can talk to, having some downtime so you don't get burnout, and that way you can continue to be productive for the economy. Because ultimately, this is what we are taught, and this is what we are bred to believe is our purpose on this earth, is productivity and creating progression economically. This is a major problem that we have within the whole world, but particularly in the Western world with the advancement of neoliberalism and capitalism. Now, with that introduction, so we have that understanding that, look, they don't really go towards what is the root cause. They don't go towards what is the depth of this, how can we actually change this structurally from its foundations. They don't look at the root. So even another quick example, without killing too much of the time, is, for example, we say the concept of terrorism. Okay, so they look at terrorism and say, oh, you know, why are they doing this? Why are they resisting, or why are they killing and maiming people? But they ignore the fact that, you know, in the West, we arm our militaries and enter these countries, and we cause all of this violence, and yet we don't expect any blowback. And when it happens, we give it a nicely, neatly defined term like terrorism. In the same way, this is the same thing. We just say, okay, why are you unhappy? You're working 50 hours a week. You're not seeing anybody. We only value what monetary value that you can bring into the economy. If you can bring this monetary gain, this is valued. And I'll give you a good example when we talk in comparison to Islam. So on these nights in the holy month of Ramadan, we usually have, after iftar and after the majlis, we go and have a hangout with family or the boys, and you know, and you sit around and chat and eat and drink tea. And if you tell somebody, look, I need to leave because I need to get up early for namaz, they say, oh, stay, brother, stay. But if you tell him, no, brother, I've got work early in the morning, say, oh, you're right, you should go to work. So namaz doesn't have that value. But if you're going to make monetary gain, it has value. So I give you that as an excuse, and I let you take leave because of this. No. So this is a, yeah.
No, I was just saying that's very beautiful, a very wonderful example. Just the other night, one person had to leave, and we made a joke, oh, he has to go pray Salatul Layl. But we say it as a joke. Even if we do bring it up, we say it as a joke, as opposed to really encouraging the individual and ourselves to take part in such an honorable activity.
Exactly. And this is the problem. It's because we are bred in this manner. It is imposed upon us, and then rather than like the government or the media pushing this upon us, we begin to push it onto our own children. We look at them and say, no, this is more important. Your academic achievement is more important. Not your actual education, not your nourishment in knowledge or a wholesome style education, but no, specialize, you'll make more money. In that sense, this is what's valued, this is what's important. And we don't look at the other aspect, which is really the important questions that we are generally in our societies, in the modern globalized world. We're not allowed to ask these questions. Questions such as, why am I here? Why was I created? What is my purpose in life? And this is exactly the point that we need to focus on. But what is my purpose? Why, with everything and all the material possessions I have, do I still feel empty? And these are the root symptoms of poor mental health. Because their definition for mental health, or let's say the definition by the medical authorities of mental health and poor mental health, is basically you're just not happy with the way things are. This is what it is. And that's why they say, they define it, the WHO defines it as having the ability to cope. To cope. What does this mean? Are we being tortured or beaten? It reminds me of the it reminds me of the motto of the Auschwitz concentration camp. You know, work makes you free, and this is the motto that they would put, and you just have to cope with this. And so in the real world, it's almost like they're giving us that motto again: work makes you free. But I have other questions. No, it's your mental health. Your resilience isn't up to date. And you say, well, it's not working. Well, let me fix you. We have some fun.
Well, Sheikhna, I mean, sometimes they won't even fix you. Like here in Canada, for example, I think last year, the government sponsored or paid for and funded the euthanasia, people to literally kill themselves. And
that's right. The Made laws.
We had about 10,000 Canadians that underwent, or if that's the right word, euthanasia, and because they couldn't cope with mental health, and the government have supported now this practice. So not even fixing you, basically ending your life. You know, that's
terminating. And this is why I compare it to concentration camps. Excuse me, it's just an alarm that's going off.
No problem.
So it's like, in that sense, the concept of the concentration camp, that look, if you're not fit for it, then let's move you out because you are now undesirable, and let's move on. And so this is why sometimes it's very hard when we use the term, because they coin these terms, and when I say they, being the authorities or the media, coin these terms to mean precisely what they want them to mean, and there's no room for leeway. So the second you resist, you're a terrorist. The second you want to speak about, for example, mental health, they say, yes, it's mental health. It's purely psychological. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. But is this what it really is? You know, there's a body of evidence. There's upcoming research, a lot of new research that says, this is not the case. We are really barely touching on the symptomatic elements of what we have termed and coined as mental health. So within this holy month, Shahr Ramadan, and this is what we need to look at. The first thing that we need to understand when we look at mental health is the core purpose. And I'm going to use very simple terms. I'm not a medical professional, and there's nothing wrong with seeking medical help if you are unwell. Definitely, it's always good to have some counseling. It's good to try every option that you can before you take pharmaceutical solutions, because many a time you may be offered these sorts of drugs, and these sorts of drugs push you further away. And even they don't really understand, and you look at, and this is just not my opinion, or nor is it anecdotal, but have a look, there's a big body of research that's speaking about, yes, we can play with the dopamine, we can play with the serotonin, but we don't really know exactly what it's doing or if it's beneficial. However, there is also a corpus of research that is focused on fasting and mental health. And the results are amazing. They are noticing that people who fast build this resilience, have this ability to cope with a lot more of the things and the tribulations that happen within this world, the trials and tribulations. They have that ability to cope and have that strength to stand against it, to be resilient through everything that happens. So in this holy month, Shahr Ramadan, this is a month of blessing. And it comes down particularly, and as this program is on an Islamic television station, and the concepts within Islam, our purpose in life is to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our purpose in life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah promises us a happy life through this, in this world and the hereafter. And this is ultimately how this holy month and fasting in this holy month gives us that strength and that ability to be able to cope with our mental health, to be able to give us a stronger mental health using their terminologies. And really the way that Islam looks at it, it's about giving you purpose. Because the root cause of mental illness, and a lot of people say, oh, it's like a faith or something like that. These are all peripheral causes, definitely peripheral causes. But just because you have, let's say you feel anxiety or depression, doesn't mean, your faith is broken or you lack faith. Definitely you still have that faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you're on a down, which is fine. These things happen, and you should seek whatever help you need to seek, whether it's through Western medicine, whether it's through counseling. And sorry, I reiterate this because I don't want people to feel stigmatized or people to feel pushed aside. But the root cause is perception versus reality. Perception versus reality. So what happens is we are given that perception that you, for example, growing up in the West, you can get a good education. If you do the right things, you'll get a good job, you'll get good pay, and you'll be able to live a good and happy life. But the reality is, your perception is something far beyond. And when reality meets perception, you notice that there is a disparity. Because you imagine by now you would have a mansion, by now you would have fast cars, by now you would have a nice boat, perhaps you'll be able to take excellent holidays, and the reality is far from that. In fact, you're working 50 or 60 hours with a promise that you might get a pay raise or something good will happen, but it almost seems, particularly in the West, for the working class, this is something that's out of reach. And when I feel that I have been promised that, and I have that hope that this will happen, and it doesn't happen, this equals depression, full stop. There was an interesting study that they said, and it's particularly when you have this feeling where you don't know what's going to happen next. There was a study about people that are waiting for a train or a bus service, public transport. They said that people that were uninformed of when the next bus will come or when the next train will come experience the same levels of anxiety and stress that a person that is going through a heart attack. Can you believe this?
Ajib.
Ajib, fa'lan ajib. This is really strange, but this is the truth. Why? Because the people, for them, this is something that's unknown, and it causes a huge amount of stress that they don't know what's going to happen next. This is the same thing in our day-to-day life. We have this perception. It's even worse because we have this great expectation of the good things that should come to me, and then they don't, even if I do the right things. And this, in essence, it's a reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let you know that this dunya is not for us. And this is Allah calling you, come back. Why? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us everything that we wanted, لَبَغَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ, it says in the Holy Quran, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not specified the amount of rizq we all receive and regulates it throughout our lives, then we would become tyrannical unto one another. But it's never enough. We will become tyrannical if we had all of the things that we want, because we all imagine, one day if my dropshipping business works and everything else that I do, I'll be able to sit back and money will just be generated and I'll have so much money that I can do whatever it is that I want.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when this doesn't happen, I get sad. That sadness evolves into depression, which they say 10% of Americans suffer from this, according to the World Health Organization. And depression eventually becomes anxiety. So anxiety is apparently a higher level in their designation, and that anxiety, 30% of Americans suffer from this anxiety, and then they give it different levels of anxiety. But the point is, how do we avoid this? Or how can we help ourselves against this? If you have any input, please.
No, I was just going to say, Sheikh, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that the numbers are certainly a lot higher in Canada, as far as I remember, when I was reading upon the same topic just a few days ago. And Sheikh, I know we have only, about under 10 minutes left. The topic, as we introduced, is how can we use this blessed month to improve our mental health? And as we know, Sheikh, that Ramadan is a time where we are supposed to meditate, pray, and reflect. Often we would pray and pray a lot, but we would very rarely, or I mean, I'll speak for myself, very rarely do I have the chance to reflect and to meditate. Especially when you look at, for example, for those of us working, or for those of us who are parents. In my situation, I'm about to move homes, inshallah, in the next couple of days. So there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on. And even if I wasn't moving, right, there would still be a lot going on. We are working during the daytime. In the evening time, it's a race to get to the mosque. To get your children ready for Quran, and then you have the dua, and then you have the iftar, and then by the time you come home, you're exhausted. And so you're always constantly on the move. And for our women, our sisters, perhaps, they're busy cooking meals for their families. So there's always something or the other happening during the month of Ramadan, right? So how can we create a schedule that allows us to balance our mental health as well as being in the state of fasting and being able to benefit from the month of Ramadan?
Okay, so fasting, according to the narrations, particularly in the holy month, Shahr Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says that Allah created fasting ibtila'an lil-ikhlas, or li-ikhlas al-khalq. Fatima al-Zahra, salawatullahi alayha, she says, as-siyam tathbitan lil-ikhlas, which means that fasting was created to try people so they can show their sincerity in action. And this is basically cementing sincerity in action. Now, when they mention it as sincerity in action, it's about you coming to that realization and actualization that your purpose in this world is to gain nearness to your Creator, to please your Creator, and through this or therein lies your happiness. And so, in this holy month, we have that chance, because we have the designation as human beings from a biological perspective as basically animals with intellect, or animals that can speak, or animals with opposable thumbs. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, you are not animals, you are the sons of Adam. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have given the sons of Adam honor, we have honored them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that chance to say, to show to yourself that, you know what, I am not just what my animalistic instincts are. And during this holy month, you have that ability to put your instincts on hold. Your instinct to eat, I'm not going to do it for 30 days during the day. To drink, I'm not doing it. To have intimacy or your conjugal actions, you say, I'm not going to do this. And these are all animalistic in essence if we remove the element of the soul. If we remove the element of the ruh, then this is just, or the nafs, then this is just animalistic. Every animal eats and drinks and conjugates. So we have that opportunity to say, Ya Allah, look, I am not an animal. And further, I prove to myself that I'm not an animal. My instinct says eat, but I say no. My instinct says drink, but I say no. There's scientific backing, but put that aside. Islamically, when I do this, I all of a sudden develop this resilience and this strength. It's sort of like the example one of the ulama gives is a tree that is growing near a river. It has unlimited water. If that river dries out, immediately that tree dies. Whereas a tree that grows on a rocky outcrop that rarely gets water, it is resilient and it waits for when the water comes and it will stay strong. This is similar to us when we are fasting. Furthermore, when you have that ability to unlock your instinctual chains from your body, your soul is free. And when your soul is free, it can communicate with its Lord. And so when you pray, your prayer is different. Your dua is different. When you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you are fasting, it's a different level. Why? There is no desire. There's nothing to come and enter your mind because you don't even have the energy to think. You have already placed yourself under control. Your intellect has now controlled your body and all of its earthly and worldly desires. All that is left is the freedom of your soul. That soul then communicating with its Lord, subhanAllah, you notice in this holy month, dua has a different flavor. It has a different ring. You enjoy to listen to it. You think about the meanings of it. This forms that connection. This schedule that you create of speaking to your Creator through dua, which is the most important, in fact, perhaps it is the purpose of our creation, and listening to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to say through the Holy Quran is something that we need to carry beyond. And this meditation, or if you'd like to call it reflection, that you reflect on these words, that what is it that I am saying? We live in a time, and I know we don't have much time, but we live in a time where people just do things for the purpose of doing it. So for example, we read Dua al-Kumail on Thursday night, but we're not actually making dua. We're just reading Dua al-Kumail. Few words, we say it, we finish and we leave. But when you actually make dua, which means you're actually asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inni as'aluka, I'm actually asking you, برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء, by your mercy that encompasses all things, and so on and so forth. Or even in the adiyah we say dua al-iftitah in Shahr Ramadan, this holy month, same thing. So when we develop this ability to connect with Allah, we need to take it with us outside of this month. And this is where you'll see that true effect, because within that month you have this power and strength and spirituality, but once you leave, you need to maintain these habits that you have built within this month. This will give you mental health and resilience against trials and tribulations.
Ahsan, thank you, Sheikh. So, Sheikh, now, let me just try and, it's too late to break the ice, but to try and just gain insight into what a Sheikh or someone like yourselves, Ramadan schedule would be like. And for us to maybe gain inspiration out of, you don't have to share any personal details, but just generally speaking, what is your schedule like in Ramadan? And is your Ramadan different? Is your schedule different in the month of Ramadan compared to outside of it?
Definitely. Look, it does have its differences, but in all honesty, what I find in Shahr Ramadan, because it's so blessed, that I actually complete much more than I ever imagined in the months outside. Not just Islamically, even when you look towards your worldly life. So I don't really put anything on hold. I still do everything that I need to do and more, because I find that even if you sleep little in Shahr Ramadan, you have more energy. Even when you do a little bit of work, it seems to be blessed work. Whatever it is that you do, whether it's writing an article, whether it's giving a lecture, whether it's working with youth, and therefore that schedule within the holy month is a schedule that the way that we keep it, we are ultimately forced to go to the Islamic centers every night. So I actually envy the brothers that don't need to go. We're forced to go to give lectures and do things. We have to be there. Others that don't have to be there and they are there, I envy the fact that they have this. Because then I don't feel like my one is on my volition. It's like, no, the Sheikh has to be there, so I have to go. Otherwise, whatever reason, people will talk, or I've been invited, or whatever it might be. But the people that don't have to be there, these are the people that you should look at their schedules, because these are people that are working during the day. These are the people that are actually putting in that extra effort. And in honesty, I envy the fact that they do this. So that schedule, it doesn't really change much. What actually changes is the person. But because of this holy month, I say I'm going to make my akhlaq a little bit better. I'm going to be nicer to my children. I'm going to be nicer to for example, my inferiors in that sense. You know, the people who are weaker than me, like my children, for example, or things, or people in that position. I'm going to give more charity, because in this month it is more blessed. And so what I attempt to do is whatever good deeds I can do, I do it now. I concentrate more on the Holy Quran than I do in other days. I have a moment to spare, and I say to myself, you know what, with this moment to spare, you can read some Quran, even if it's just one page. When I read dua, I take more care in the dua that I read. And the beauty is, because you're not eating it or drinking, a lot of the time that you usually spend preparing or eating food or going to the bathroom doesn't exist. So that time that you've gained, you use that for something else. So again, the schedule, to be honest with you, for myself, doesn't really change much. But what changes is the personal transformation, and the fact that I feel that blessing within that action, and I feel that I can connect with Allah. Because in other months, your desires and your sins, they form a block. You hear the dua and you're like, man, when's this guy going to finish the dua? For example, you don't have that sweet taste. You read Quran, you read a little bit, and you know, you get bored. But these are the things that we need to say, you know what, I need to keep this outside, because this is what will give me that resilience and strength, the connection with my Creator. There is no strength or change except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that sense, the schedule really isn't something special or different for most, and I believe for most mashayikh, most maulanas, their schedule, I'm pretty sure, remains a lot throughout, pretty much the same.
Ahsan. Sheikh, we have about just a minute left to get the program. Sheikh, as we end the show, can I ask you to just share maybe one prayer that you think will benefit our mental health in this month of Ramadan?
The best prayer in the holy month of Ramadan, and this is the most important thing, it's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us of our sins. Because I'll tell you why, the burden of sin is perhaps the biggest chain, biggest yoke around our necks when it comes to mental health, most definitely. And who forgives the sins other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because these sins, this is what drags us down. When we have these sins, it sits on your conscience, it sits on your heart. And if you look at most people that abuse substances or alcohol or anything, most of it is because those sins are dragging them down. So that dua that we say every night, A'udhu bi jalali wajhika al-kareem, I seek refuge in the beauty and manifestation of your face, Ya Allah. And in our narrations, that's Ahlulbayt salamullah alayh. أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذه ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه. That I beseech you, Ya Allah, that this Fajr does not come out on this night except that you have forgiven every sin that I have and every consequence of sin. Because once these things go and you feel it in Shahr Ramadan, this is when you feel at peace. There's no sins, there's no guilt, you don't owe anyone. All of this goes away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes this and you will be peace of heart and at peace of mind. This dua you should say in every prayer and every night.
Ahsant. Ahsan, thank you so much, Sheikhna, for your time again on Ahlulbayt TV this evening. This was a wonderful discussion to have. I'm glad we had this at the beginning of the month, inshallah, and I hope our viewers will take benefit and will most certainly be reciting this prayer, as will I. Until then, Sheikhna, and of course, until then, we'll see you next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.